The stem of the wine glass caught the light just long enough for the room to notice. Then it tilted, a full arc, a red streak flying like a warning flare. It hit him square across the chest. The sound wasn't loud, just the soft splash of Cabernet against cotton, but in that gilded ballroom, with the chandeliers breathing gold onto every table, it landed like a gunshot. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Cutlery paused in mid-air. Heads turned toward the man standing in the center of the room, his white shirt blooming red like a slow-moving wound. He didn't flinch. Not even when the woman in the glittering champagne dress leaned in, laughing loud enough for the entire banquet hall to hear, and jabbed her finger toward him. "Get out of here!" Her voice sliced the air, sharp, rehearsed, dripping with entitlement. Behind her, a cluster of tuxedoed guests chuckled, some hiding their grins behind half-empty glasses. One man lifted his phone, the screen glowing, already recording. The black man at the center of it all simply raised his own phone to his ear, calm as stone, as if this humiliation was nothing more than background noise interrupting a business call. His left hand slid into his pocket. His right thumb steadied the phone. His breathing stayed even. A dark red stain spread across his shirt, but his expression didn't change. The woman stepped closer, swirling her remaining wine like she'd just discovered a new party trick. "I said leave. People like you don't just wander into events like this." Gasps fluttered across the room. Someone whispered, "Is he staff?" Another voice muttered, "Who invited him?" A few guests laughed again, small, cruel, comfortable laughs the kind people allow themselves when they're certain they're punching down. But he still didn't respond. Not with anger, not with shame, not even a raised voice, only a quiet inhale, a slight turn of the head, and a look that felt less like submission and more like choosing which moment to destroy the room. Behind him, a server froze with a tray of crystal flutes. The young man recognized that face had seen it once on a framed plaque in the staff briefing room, but fear held his tongue. Management's eyes were on him. The woman tossed the last drops of her wine onto the floor at his feet. "Don't just stand there," she snapped. "You're ruining the atmosphere." He lifted the phone a little higher. His voice was low, controlled, almost gentle. "Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now back to Adrian." He lowered the phone, eyes finally meeting hers, steady, unshaken, unreadable. And for the first time all night, her smile faltered. Not because he threatened her, because somewhere in that stillness, she sensed the truth. She had no idea who she just threw wine on. And the room was about to find out. The stain on Adrian's shirt spread like a map of someone else's anger. But he didn't brush it, didn't look down, didn't even adjust his posture. He simply lowered the phone from his ear, letting the last fragments of his quiet conversation dissolve into the hum of chandeliers above him. The woman in the champagne dress planted one hand on her hip, emboldened by the attention she'd gathered. Her smile widened, the satisfied kind, the kind that believed the room belonged to her. "You heard me," she said, voice dripping honey and venom in equal measure. "Leave, now, before you embarrass yourself further." Her friends nodded as if she'd just delivered a public service announcement. A gray-haired man at the nearest table lifted his glass. "Don't make a scene, buddy," he warned, tone patronizing. "These events aren't open to everyone." Someone else added, "He probably slipped past security." Ugh. A woman in pearls whispered loud enough to be heard, "He's dressed too simple. Look at him. No one important." Adrian didn't give them the satisfaction of reacting. He stood there, hands loose at his sides, eyes scanning the room not with fear, not with shame, but with a stillness at odds, with the chaos swelling around him, the stillness of someone collecting data, watching people reveal themselves. Then came the line that always shows up when small minds gather. "This is a private charity gala," the champagne dress woman said. "We have standards." The word cracked across the ballroom like an insult wrapped in velvet. Near the back of the room, the young server, 17, maybe 18, stiffened. He knew that face. He'd seen it during orientation week, printed on a glossy poster titled, "Founding Investors and Executive Partners." The caption had read, "Adrian Cole, Strategic Equity Partner." Now the same man stood drenched in red wine while the wealthy laughed. The server took half a step forward, mouth opening. Then the restaurant manager appeared at his shoulder, hand clamping firmly. "Don't get involved," the manager hissed. Stay in your lane. The boy froze, jaw tight, eyes flicking helplessly between Adrian and the hand gripping his arm. Back at the center of the ballroom, the champagne dress woman gave a dramatic sigh and waved for security. Oh, for heaven's sake. Can someone remove him? He's ruining the photos. Her friends laughed. Adrian finally raised his head. A soft exhale. A subtle shift of focus. The kind of movement that doesn't look like anything until you realize the room just got colder. No anger. No rush. Only a faint tightening at the edge of his jaw, like someone filing away details for later. And beneath the golden glow of chandelier light, a simple truth hovered. They weren't mocking a stranger. They were mocking the man who could erase this entire evening with a single decision. And he hadn't even begun to speak. The ballroom shifted its weight, the way a ship tilts before anyone admits it's sinking. Guests leaned in, whispering behind jeweled fingers. Some didn't bother hiding it. Probably a caterer trying to sneak a look around. No, maybe a guest driver? Who comes to a gala dressed like that? People always pretend they belong. Each line landed with the same lazy confidence, the kind of cruelty practiced so often it felt like etiquette. The champagne dress woman turned fully toward Adrian now, basking in the attention she'd curated. If you want to avoid trouble, she said, walk yourself out. There's the door. She gestured toward the grand entrance, chandeliers reflecting off her bracelet like tiny shards of authority. No one noticed the server watching from across the room, the one who knew exactly who he was. Adrian remained still, eyes lowered in a contemplative way, not submissive, not defeated, but deliberate. He studied the red stain on his shirt as if it were data, as if the liquid soaking into cotton told him more about the people in front of him than any introduction could. Across the ballroom, a man in an emerald suit nudged his date. Ignore him. They always want a reaction. His date nodded, sipping champagne. Yeah, that type needs attention to feel relevant. That type. There it was again, the phrase dressed like a slur without saying the slur. The young server swallowed hard. Then the scene fractured further. A tall security guard began making his way through the crowd, shoulders cutting a path between sequins and silk. The guests relaxed, reassured that their authority, was on its way to clean up the problem. The champagne dress woman straightened, as if she'd personally ordered the guard. He's right there, she called, pointing straight at Adrian like she was identifying stolen property. Remove him. Oh, the guard nodded once, expression unreadable, and continued forward. The murmurs sharpened. Finally, should have done this 10 minutes ago. Honestly, why was he even allowed inside? Someone's going to lose their job over this slip. But beneath the rising chatter, something else stirred. The first crack. A woman near the back lowered her phone, frowning. He didn't do anything, she whispered to her husband. She threw the wine. Her husband shrugged, uncomfortable but unwilling to step out of line. Just stay out of it. The server clenched his jaw. He knew he shouldn't speak. He knew the manager watching him like a hawk would punish him for it. But silence was becoming heavier than the tray in his hands. He took one small, shaky breath, the kind someone takes right before they choose who they want to be, and stepped forward again. Not enough to be noticed. Not yet, but enough to feel the moment shift around him. Meanwhile, Adrian lifted his gaze, locking eyes with the approaching guard. His expression didn't harden. His posture didn't tense. If anything, he looked almost patient, as if he'd been waiting for this exact escalation, as if the entire evening was unfolding according to an invisible script only he understood. And with that single, steady look, the guard hesitated one beat, barely perceptible, but real. The first tiny fracture in a room convinced of its own righteousness. A fracture that was about to split the night wide open. The security guard's hesitation lasted less than a second, but in a ballroom where arrogance had been echoing unchecked, even a second felt like a crack of thunder. A ripple of confusion moved through the guests. Why wasn't he grabbing the man? Why wasn't this handled already? The champagne dress woman scoffed loudly, trying to reclaim command of the room. Don't just stand there, she snapped at the guard. Do your job. He's disrupting the event. Her friends murmured in agreement, like a chorus trained in entitlement. The guard adjusted his shoulders, preparing to continue, until a voice broke through the murmur. Soft, shaky, but clear. Ma'am, he's not disrupting anything. The server had stepped forward. The tray in his hands trembled slightly, but he held it steady enough to look deliberate. His eyes darted between Adrian, the guard, and the woman who seemed to believe the world spun for her comfort. She turned slowly, incredulous that anyone so low-ranked dared interrupt her performance. "Excuse me?" The boy swallowed. I just, I just want to be accurate. He didn't throw anything. He didn't yell. He didn't." She cut him off with a laugh that wasn't amusement so much as disbelief. "Oh, spare me. You think people like him need to yell? They come in with an attitude already." The server's jaw clenched. He looked at the floor, then at the guard, then finally at Adrian, the man who had stayed silent while the room sharpened its claws. "He didn't do anything wrong," the boy said again, firmer this time. The manager was on him instantly, voice a furious hiss. "Get back to your station now. You're not part of this." The server didn't move. A single step forward. A defiance so small it barely disturbed the air, but it shifted the moral center of the room. The champagne dress woman folded her arms, staring him down. "And you are? What, a hero now?" "No, ma'am," he replied quietly. I recognize him." That sentence hit harder than the wine had. The murmurs stopped. Even the guard blinked. "You what?" the woman spat. The server nodded, fear and conviction wrestling in his expression. "He's in the orientation book, the investor board. His photo is right next to the founders." He turned toward the guard and the guests behind him. "He's not staff. He's not a nobody. He's—" The manager grabbed his arm, trying to yank him back. "Enough, you're done here." But the damage was done, followed by silence, a thick, electric silence, the kind that comes right before a storm tears the roof off. The champagne dress woman's confidence flickered. Her friends exchanged tight, uncertain glances. The guard straightened, mind recalibrating. And Adrian? He didn't move a muscle. His expression stayed impossibly calm, like a man watching a long-awaited truth finally find its way into the open. No triumph. No rush. Just a slow exhale, the exhale of someone who knew. This was only the beginning. The room had heard the first truth. The next one would shatter everything. The moment the server's words hit the air, something brittle snapped inside the champagne dress woman. Not fear. Not guilt. Something uglier, the frantic need to reclaim the room she thought she owned. She stepped toward Adrian, heels clicking like sharpened punctuation. "I don't care who he looks like," she said, voice rising just enough to pull the crowd back to her orbit. "People fake credentials all the time. Look at him dressed like that, standing there like he's above everyone." Ugh. Her hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. Gasps rippled through the ballroom. The security guard flinched too late. Wine stains were one thing, words were another. But physical contact, that was the moment everyone's instincts kicked at once. "Don't touch him," the server blurted, breaking free of the manager's grip. But the woman tightened her hold, her fingers digging into Adrian's skin as if she wanted to drag him toward the door herself. "Move!" she hissed. "I'm not asking again." The manager jumped in, eager to fix the chaos he should have prevented. "Sir," he barked, "you need to comply. You're creating a disturbance." Adrian still didn't raise his voice. He didn't pull away. He simply lifted his eyes to meet the woman's, and for the first time since the wine hit his chest, something flickered in them, not anger, memory. A room. A hallway. Years ago, he was 22, standing in a boutique hotel lobby, holding a resume in one hand and a borrowed blazer that didn't quite fit. A security guard had blocked his path with the same dismissive expression. "Deliveries go through the back." He'd tried to speak, but the guard didn't listen. Not then. Not ever. That same dismissive hand had shoved him toward the service hallway, the place where people assumed he belonged. The humiliation burned like a bruise that never fully faded. And now, decades later, another hand was on him. Another shove disguised as protocol. Another room full of people deciding, without evidence, what he was allowed to be. His jaw tightened. Back in the present, the champagne dress woman yanked harder. "Security!" she barked as though the guard hadn't already been standing right there. "Get him out before this gets worse." A guest near the bar muttered, "Why hasn't he been removed yet?" Another added, "If he's someone important, why isn't he saying anything?" The guard stepped forward again, torn between orders and the server's warning. "Sir, please." Adrian finally spoke. 2 words. "Let go." They weren't loud. They weren't violent. But something in the tone, low, even immovable, made the guard stop breathing for a second. The woman laughed, trying to mask the tremor that crept into her fingers. "Oh, you don't give orders here," the server whispered, barely audible. "He actually does." But the room was too loud, too brimming with false confidence to hear the truth. So the woman yanked Adrian's arm one more time, and that was the moment the night crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The breaking point had arrived, and the storm he'd been holding back was about to move. The ballroom seemed to inhale all at once a collective, stunned breath as the champagne dress woman yanked Adrian's arm for the final time. Her bracelet scraped his wrist. Her perfume pressed into the air like a challenge. Everyone watched, waiting for the explosion they believed was inevitable. Instead, Adrian reached into his pocket. Slow, precise, measured. He pulled out his phone. Not to film her, not to defend himself, not to explain. He dialed. Just one tap. The kind of tap that doesn't look like much unless you understand exactly which systems it can wake up. The champagne dress woman scoffed loudly. Oh, look at this. Calling for backup? Who, your Uber driver? Laughter scattered through her table like broken glass. Adrian didn't look at her. He lifted the phone to his ear, posture steady despite the wine clinging cold to his shirt. A voice answered instantly. Mr. Cole, are you in place? The room didn't hear the voice, only saw Adrian's expression shift. So subtly it almost went unnoticed. Almost. Initiate internal protocol, he said quietly. Flag tonight's incident. Live record from this moment forward. The server's eyes widened. The guard's shoulders tensed. The manager took an involuntary step back, sensing something had slipped out of his control. The champagne dress woman frowned. What protocol? What is he even? Adrian spoke again, calm as a winter tide. And notify the operations board that I'm on site and requesting immediate escalation. Silence cracked across the room like ice fracturing. The manager rushed forward, hands raised as if trying to physically block the words from leaving Adrian's mouth. Sir, whatever you're doing, please don't. This isn't necessary. Adrian didn't spare him a look. 30-second timestamp, he said into the phone. Confirm. Confirmed, the voice replied. Board is being pinged. The manager's face drained. He knew exactly what those words meant. Everyone else didn't not yet, but they felt it. The shift in gravity, the sudden unease creeping into the edges of their certainty. The champagne dress woman tried to recover her confidence with a laugh. What board? What are you, the president of something? She gestured wildly at the wine-soaked shirt. Please, you look like someone they hired last minute to refill the ice buckets. Adrian finally looked at her, not angry, not amused. Just done. You shouldn't have touched me, he said softly. The softness was the part that made her step back. The guard cleared his throat, suddenly unsure. Sir, who exactly are you calling? Adrian held the guard's stare, calm as stone. The people who own this building, he said. The people who sign your checks. A beat. The people who outrank everyone in this room. Whispers erupted like sparks hitting dry grass. Own? Wait, what does he mean? Is he serious? Who is he? But Adrian continued speaking into the phone, ignoring the rising panic around him. Activate the oversight team, he said. Bring them here now. On their way, the voice replied. Estimated arrival, 3 minutes. The room froze. 3 minutes. 3 minutes before everything changed. Adrian lowered the phone, his posture settling into something heavy enough to reshape the atmosphere around him. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply ended the call, and with that one quiet gesture, the balance of power in the ballroom shifted, no longer tilting away from him, but collapsing toward him. The storm had begun to move. The ballroom wasn't buzzing anymore. It was trembling, not violently, not visibly, but in the subtle, electric way a room trembles when it realizes it may have misjudged the wrong man. The champagne dress woman's confidence began to wilt at the edges. She straightened her posture, like resetting herself, trying to reclaim the high ground. This is ridiculous, she snapped, glancing around for support. He's bluffing. Anyone can pretend to be someone important on a phone call. Anyone. But no one echoed her this time. Her friends looked away. The guard's gaze wavered. Even the manager, sweating through his collar, had gone silent. Adrian didn't acknowledge any of them. He simply wiped a fingertip across a drip of wine traveling down his shirt, examining the stain like an afterthought. Then he lifted his eyes, and the room seemed to hold still for the verdict. The server took a half-step forward, voice cautious but steady. He's not bluffing, the boy said. I told you. He's on the investor board. He's one of the owners. The champagne dress woman spun toward him, fury rising to mask her fear. You don't know what you're talking about. Yes, he does, Adrian finally said. It was the first time he directly addressed anyone since the wine hit him. Conversations died mid-breath. Every ear locked onto his voice. He took a step forward, small, controlled, but it might as well have been an earthquake. His shoes were silent against the marble, yet the movement commanded more attention than her shouting ever had. "You threw wine on me," he said, eyes fixed on the woman who had spent the night performing cruelty like it was a talent. "In a building I co-own. A pausa sharp, intencional. And at an event I partly funded." The words didn't echo. They sank. They landed. They rearranged the atmosphere. The champagne dress woman blinked rapidly, her mouth opening but producing no sound. Her friends' faces drained of color. Someone whispered, "Oh, God." The guard straightened instinctively. "Sir Mr. Cole, why didn't you say something sooner?" Adrian's response cut through the air like a clean blade. "Because I don't prove myself to people who decide my worth before they know my name." Silence. A heavy, breathtaking silence, the kind that would replay in every person's memory long after the night was over. He took another step toward the woman. She backed up. Her heel caught slightly on the edge of the rug. "You called me a problem," he said. "You tried to have me removed." And then the line that froze the room solid. "You mistook my silence for weakness. That was your last mistake." A sharp inhale rippled through the guests. Someone near the back whispered, "He warned her." Another murmured, "This is about to get bad." But Adrian didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The cadence of his words carried the weight of a man who'd been judged too many times, by too many rooms just like this, and had outgrown every one of them. The champagne dress woman finally found her voice. "You can't just walk in here and... I didn't walk in," Adrian said, cutting her off. "I belong here. You're the one who forgot whose name is on the contract." And with that single line, the night tipped, no longer sliding against him. It was collapsing toward him. The moment Adrian spoke that final line, the ballroom felt colder, like someone had opened a door to winter and let it seep across the marble floor. The champagne dress woman's face drained of color until the shimmer of her dress was the only thing keeping her from disappearing into the background entirely. What do you mean your name is on the contract?" she stammered. Adrian didn't answer her. He didn't need to, because the doors at the far end of the ballroom swung open. 3 figures stepped inside, operations executives, their badges glinting beneath the gold light. Not security, not staff, people whose authority sat above everyone in the room. A hush fell so heavy it felt physical. The manager was the first to react. His voice cracked like a snapped twig. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Lee, Mr. Rowland, what are you doing here?" Bennett, the lead executive, didn't look at him. Her eyes locked instantly onto Adrian. "Mr. Cole," she said, posture straightening. "We received the escalation. Oversight team is present. Documentation active. Please confirm the nature of the incident." The words hit the ballroom like a bomb wrapped in etiquette. Mr. Cole. Not seer. Not guest. A title spoken only to someone who existed on the top rung of the corporate ladder. The champagne dress woman staggered a step back, nearly tripping over her own certainty. Adrian didn't raise his voice. "I was assaulted." The word assaulted echoed across the hall, bouncing off crystal glasses and ornate pillars. Guests who had been whispering judgments seconds earlier now stood frozen, faces tight with the realization that they'd chosen the wrong side. Bennett nodded once. "Understood." She turned to the manager. Her voice was as cold as the marble beneath them. "Shut the event down right now." "What?" the champagne dress woman gasped. You can't shut down my party?" "Oh, it's not your party," Bennett replied. "It's Mr. Cole's venue." 2 security supervisors, actual ones, stepped in from the hallway. Rowland addressed them sharply. "Escort the primary aggressor outside. Detain for documentation." The woman stumbled backward, both hands raised. "Wait, stop, you don't understand. I didn't know who he was." Adrian finally looked at her. "That's exactly the problem," he said. The supervisors took her by the arms, not violently, but with the firm precision of people who follow protocol, not ego. Her voice cracked into the room in a panicked wail as she twisted toward her friends. "Do something. Don't just stand there." But they stood there, all of them, frozen, silent, shrinking into themselves as the weight of what they'd enabled settled on their shoulders. The manager tried one last desperate plea. "Mr. Cole, sir, if you'll allow us to correct this." Adrian didn't look at him. He addressed Bennett instead. "Logged?" he asked. "Logged," she confirmed. "Full record. Time-stamped from your call." The server watched it all with wide, stunned eyes, the room that had mocked Adrian now bending around him like metal pulled toward a magnet. Adrian stepped forward, the crowd parting in instinctive deference. And the collapse continued. Not loud, not messy, just inevitable. Justice wasn't noisy tonight. It was methodical, corporate, precise, and unstoppable. The ballroom, once loud with laughter, smugness, and the clinking of expensive glass, had fallen into a stunned, reverent quiet, the kind of quiet that follows a verdict. The champagne-dressed woman's cries echoed faintly from the hallway as she was escorted out, her voice unraveling into something strained and desperate. Her friends stood motionless, staring at the floor as though it might swallow them whole. Adrian walked forward, the wine on his shirt drying into a dark badge of every assumption made about him tonight. He didn't hide it. He didn't apologize for it. He wore it like evidence. Bennett kept pace beside him, tablet in hand, eyes sharp with focus. "Mr. Cole, do you want full contract penalties activated for the host group?" she asked. The guests flinched. Adrian didn't answer immediately. He looked around the room, scanning each face, the ones who laughed, the ones who whispered, the ones who hesitated, and the few who saw the truth before it was spoken aloud. His gaze landed on the young server. The boy stood rigid, fear still trembling in his hands, but his eyes held a steady truth. He had spoken when others hadn't. Adrian addressed him directly for the first time. "What's your name?" The boy swallowed. "Eliasir." "You stepped forward when it mattered," Adrian said. "You saw what was happening and you told the truth." The manager stiffened, sensing what was coming. "Mr. Cole, he disrupted the service." Adrian didn't even turn. "You silenced him," he said flatly, "because he didn't fit the narrative you wanted." Bennett glanced at Adrian. "Action?" Adrian nodded, eyes still on Elias. "Promote him." The manager's jaw dropped. "Sir, what? He's a temporary—" "Today," Adrian said, "he showed more integrity than anyone wearing a suit." "How?" Elias's breath hitched, disbelief softening into something like hope. Adrian finally turned back to Bennett. "As for penalties," he said, voice low but carrying through every corner of the ballroom, "apply them." Bennett tapped her tablet. "Done. Event contract revoked. Venue privileges suspended. Their organization will be notified." A ripple of shock moved through the crowd. The consequences were real, immediate, irreversible. Adrian stepped into the center of the ballroom, the same place he had stood when the wine hit him, and let the silence stretch. Let them sit in it. Let them understand. Then he spoke the line that would echo long after the night ended. "I didn't raise my voice tonight," he said. "I raised the standard. Not a threat, not a boast, a declaration, the kind that rewrites a room." Several guests lowered their eyes. A few murmured apologies to no one in particular. Elias stood tailleur. Adrian turned toward the exit, the oversight team following in his wake. Before stepping through the doors, he paused and looked back not at the woman who insulted him, not at the crowd that doubted him, but at the space itself. A room that once judged him, a room he now owned in full. He walked out without wiping the stain from his shirt, because the stain had never been on him. It had always been on them. The doors closed behind Adrian with a quiet, final click, nothing dramatic, nothing loud. Yet inside the ballroom, the silence he left behind felt louder than any slam. People stood frozen in their glittering outfits, suddenly aware of how flimsy all their assumptions had been. The chandeliers still glowed gold. The music hummed faintly through the speakers, but the atmosphere had changed shape, tilted, humbled, stripped of its arrogance. Someone exhaled shakily. "Did that really just happen?" A woman near the dessert table whispered, "He owns this entire venue?" Her husband nodded numbly. "And more than that, I think." The manager stood stiff as stone, eyes hollow. He wasn't just worried about being reprimanded, he was calculating the wreckage. The penalties, the audits, the black marks against his name. Years of climbing, undone in one night, by his own choices. In the corner, Elias, the young server, still held the empty tray, as if letting it go would break the spell. His co-workers stared at him, half in shock, half in awe. "You talked back to her," one whispered. Elias shook his head. "I talked for him," he said quietly. "Someone had to." Guests shuffled awkwardly, avoiding eye contact with each other, each replaying the moment they laughed, the moment they looked away, the moment they chose comfort over conscience. It wasn't guilt that hung in the air, it was recognition. A man in a velvet tux sighed into his glass. "We acted like we were above him." Another replied, No, we acted like we knew him. Bennett and the oversight executives remained in the room, finishing the paperwork with cold efficiency. Their presence alone kept the atmosphere taut like the room was still under trial. Bennett addressed the manager sharply. Expect a full-scale review. You'll be contacted. The manager swallowed. Yes, ma'am. Then her tone softened, but only toward one person. Elias, she said. The boy straightened. Yes? You did the right thing tonight. It wasn't praise. It was acknowledgement, a rare and heavy currency. Meanwhile, the guests gathered their belongings, but none dared be the first to leave. Leaving felt like admitting they were part of everything that went wrong. Staying felt like waiting for a second judgment. Finally, a woman near the stage whispered, I can't believe I clapped when she mocked him. Her friend touched her arm. So did half the room. A painful truth settled in. They hadn't just misjudged him. They'd revealed themselves. The music finally cut off, leaving only the hum of ventilation and nervous breaths. The room felt smaller now, less grand, less powerful. Elias stepped toward the wine stain still glistening on the marble. Funny. Hours ago, this room would have punished him for dropping a single glass. Tonight, no one dared clean the stain. It wasn't mess anymore. It was evidence. Evidence of who he was. Evidence of who they were. Evidence of the moment the room realized power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it stands there quietly, until the world trips over its own arrogance and forces it to speak. The ballroom doors had barely settled back into their frames when the conversations finally cracked open, quiet at first, like people afraid to hear their own voices. A man in a navy suit rubbed his forehead. I thought he was a waiter, he muttered. His partner shot him a look sharp enough to cut glass. You didn't think, she said. None of us did. Near the edge of the room, two women huddle whispered. He warned her, one said. No, the other corrected softly. He didn't. He just existed. And she couldn't stand that. The truth landed heavy. For years, these galas had been playgrounds of curated charity and polished egos, places where people donated to causes without ever confronting the ones inside themselves. Tonight had ripped that veneer apart. Elias stepped aside as Bennett and the oversight team began moving through the ballroom, gathering witness statements with quiet precision. Nobody argued. Nobody protested. The manager approached timidly, wringing his hands. Miss Bennett, if I could just clarify. No, she said without looking up. Not cruel, not dramatic, just final. He wilted, the weight of consequences settling onto shoulders that had never carried accountability before. Across the room, a group of guests started replaying their own behavior aloud, each more embarrassed than the last. I laughed when she mocked his clothes. I filmed it, like it was entertainment. Oh, I didn't say anything I should have. Regret filled the air, thick as the floral perfume drifting from abandoned tables. One man older, silver hair, expensive watch finally spoke what everyone was thinking. We teach our kids about prejudice, and then we do this. The silence that followed was the most honest thing that ballroom had ever heard. Elias set his tray down, wiping his palms on his apron. For the first time all night, he allowed himself to breathe fully. He replayed Adrian's words. You stepped forward when it mattered, and the world felt slightly larger, slightly clearer. A coworker approached him. You're brave, man. Elias shook his head. No, I was scared. He stood a little straighter, but I was more scared of staying quiet. That honesty felt like sunlight breaking through a stained glass window. Another executive approached Bennett. Everything is logged, he reported. Good, she replied. Tonight becomes part of training. No more pretending these incidents don't happen. Several guests looked down, shame burning across their cheeks. The champagne-dressed woman's husband slipped out a side door, not wanting to face what his silence had enabled. His absence only underscored the emptiness she'd left behind, glitter, ego, and disaster. In the center of the ballroom, the wine stain on the marble grew darker as it dried. A small circle of people stared at it not as mess, but as memory. The room, for once, didn't rush to cover its mistake. In that stain lived the truth. Adrian had walked out untouched, unshaken. The stain wasn't on him. It was on everyone who stayed silent while he was judged. The cleanup crew entered quietly, rolling in carts and linen bags, expecting the usual post-gala mess, half-eaten hors d'oeuvres, lipstick-stained glasses, wilted centerpieces. But the ballroom wasn't chaos. It was contemplation. Guests lingered in small, awkward circles, speaking in low tones, as if afraid their words might echo the way their earlier laughter had. A few still held untouched drinks, now warm in their hands, their eyes drifting toward the doors Adrian had walked through like they were waiting for him to return and somehow absolve them. He wouldn't. That wasn't his role. At the marble center of the room, the stain remained dark, matte, almost defiant. Housekeeping paused, glancing at the executives before cleaning it. Bennett shook her head once. "Leave it," she said. "For tonight." The staff obeyed. The guests understood. It wasn't a stain anymore. It was a reminder carved into the evening. Elias stood nearby, trying to process the promotion he hadn't expected, the praise he didn't think he deserved, the courage he hadn't realized he possessed. His coworkers came up one at a time, some patting his shoulder, others simply nodding with something like respect. "You changed the room," one whispered. Elias shook his head. "He did, I just spoke." But even he knew that wasn't the whole truth. One voice at the right moment can turn a tide. Across the ballroom, the manager sat hunched in a chair, staring at the floor. His authority, once stretched like a rubber band over the staff, had snapped. The oversight team gathered the last of their notes, their presence pressing the weight of accountability into every corner of the room. A cluster of older donors approached Bennett. Someone cleared their throat. "If Mr. Cole ever returns," one of them said slowly, "we'd like to apologize." Bennett closed her tablet. "Don't apologize to me," she replied. "Just be better next time." It wasn't a reprimand. It was a challenge. The crowd thinned, the lights dimmed. The glittering decorations, once symbols of status, looked strangely hollow. Outside, the cold night air met Adrian as he stepped into his waiting car. The door closed gently, blocking out the ballroom's gilt and the city's late-night noise. Through the tinted glass, he watched the building shrink behind him, its glow fading as the driver pulled away. He didn't smile. He didn't bask in the victory. He simply exhaled the long, steady breath of someone who had carried this weight before and would carry it again, without bending. Power didn't need to roar tonight. It only needed to walk out the door. Back inside, Elias was the last to leave the ballroom. He paused at the stain one final time. Most people would forget the color of the dress. Most would forget the brand of the wine. Most would forget the menu, the music, the speeches. But no one would forget the moment the room discovered what dignity looked like. They had tried to strip it from him. Instead, he raised the standard and left them standing beneath it.